Hi, my name is Hanania and welcome to my web pages. I've been a journalist for over 30 years. I actually began by accident. I was flunking English in high school, and my English teacher in my junior year asked me what I liked, and I told her I loved to play blues guitar. Blues and rock guitar, Led Zeppelin, Grand Funk Railroad, B.B. King. I was very good. I had a Gibson Les Paul. And she said, well, listen, why don't you write a column for the school newspaper on music? So that junior year, that's what I did. In my senior year, I was named editor of the school paper. I still wanted to be a doctor. I went to Northern Illinois, where I was in pre-med, hoping to be a doctor, and the Vietnam War interrupted my college. So I actually signed up for 4 years in the U.S. Air Force. While I was in the Air Force, I reached an epiphany. I turned on the television and I was watching an Arab and an Israeli. This is just after the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. This Israeli and this Arab were debating the Middle East conflicts and the history of the Middle East. And I noticed that the Israeli looked American, sounded American, spoke perfect English. He not only spoke English, but he spoke American. And he's perfectly dressed. He looked like he was your neighbor, you know what I mean? Typical American. And then when they turned to the Arab, he looked like a foreigner. He sounded like a foreigner. He couldn't pronounce English very well. He spoke in English from an Arab perspective, like he really didn't understand American. And I realized at that moment why Americans were so anti-Arab. They didn't understand us. And part of the reason they didn't understand us was that they were listening to people who couldn't communicate on behalf of Arab Americans. So that moment, watching television, inspired me to get into journalism. And when I left the Air Force, I used the GI Bill to pay for a paper that I published called the Middle Eastern Voice. And this was a 36-page paper that was in English that focused on Arab American history. And I did that for about 2 years before getting hired by the Southtown Economist, a community newspaper that covered the southwest suburbs and the city of Chicago. So I worked at the Southtown for 7 years. I ended up covering City Hall those 7 years. And in 1985, I was hired by the Chicago Sun-Times to do a celebrity column and eventually went back to City Hall. I covered City Hall through 1992. I took a sabbatical in 1992 and went into media relations. I tried to use what I learned about communications to help not just clients but also Arab Americans. Not to advocate for a political view. I wasn't an activist. I was more or less somebody trying to help Arab Americans understand communications. I still, till this day, don't believe Arab Americans really understand communications. They're not very good at it. They sound good at it. The appearance has improved from that day in 1973 when I turned on that TV set, but it hasn't changed much. In 1999, I started an Arab American newspaper again called the Arab American View. We published that for about 3 years, but stopped after September 11th. In Chicago, we had 7 Arab American newspapers. Mine was one of them. After September 11th, all but one basically forced to shut down because of anger, animosity, threats, all kinds of things. September 11th has made the challenges facing Arab Americans worse. This isn't about activism. This is about helping Americans understand the real issues in the Middle East. I'm not trying to get you to say you want to be pro-Arab and anti-Israeli. That's not what it's about. It's about helping you, the American, hear both sides of the conflict, understanding both sides of the conflict so you can make a reasoned and rational decision. And I'm confident that when you hear both sides, you can find your way to the middle, to what I believe is the moderate view for Israelis, for Palestinians, for Arabs, for Muslims, for Jews, and for Americans. That moderate view and that middle road of reason, unemotional, honest deliberation and understanding is so important. So explore my web pages, hanania.com, where you can get an overview of all my communications related activity. It includes writing columns for newspapers around the world. I'm based with the Southwest News Herald in Chicago. and I'm probably the only Arab American columnist who writes a Middle East focused column on a regular basis for a mainstream American newspaper, which is the Daily Herald in Arlington Heights in Chicago. I don't think there's another American newspaper that has an Arab American columnist that writes about the Middle East on a regular basis. I also have written several books, several humorous, many focused on the Middle East, but many focused on mainstream American issues. You can get all that information at Hanania.com. And I'm also a stand-up comedian. I love comedy. Humor is a very effective way to communicate, and I use humor in my writing all the time, before September 11th and much more after September 11th. Humor is probably the most effective form of communications, because humor, when someone laughs, it's a very personal experience. They open up personally to you. So I turn to stand-up comedy as part of my communications effort to educate people and help Americans understand, and even Israelis and Jewish Americans, that Arabs are not the enemy. The real battle isn't Arabs versus Israelis. The real battle is between extremists and moderates. That's the conflict that we have to address. And truth is on our side as moderates. So you can also visit ArabAmericanTVOnline.com and TVChicagoland.com to view some of these online broadcast videos, this alternative media that I now produce to help convey this broad communications perspective that I have going. So thank you very much for joining me, and again, you can always email me. You can subscribe to my announcement newsletter. That's also on my web pages too. So hope to see you and talk to you, and of course I'm always interested to hear your views. Thank you.